When you truly understand men emotionally, everything about love begins to change. You stop chasing what's not meant for you. You stop begging for attention. You stop overanalyzing every text, every silence, every little sign. Because once you see the truth beneath the surface, you realize that love isn't about pursuit. It's about connection, respect, and alignment. See, most people think understanding men means memorizing what they like, what they want, or how they act. But understanding a man emotionally is much deeper than that. It's about recognizing what drives him, what scares him, what softens him, and what keeps him up at night. It's about seeing beyond his words and watching his patterns. Because men don't always express their emotions in ways that make sense to you. They show them through actions, consistency, and effort. And when a man truly values you, he doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. The truth is, men crave emotional safety just as much as women do, but they rarely admit it. They want to feel like they can be respected, trusted, and seen for more than just what they provide. They want to feel appreciated without being controlled, desired without being chased, and supported without losing their sense of independence. When a man feels emotionally understood, that's when he lets his guard down. That's when he starts giving you the best parts of himself. But when he feels misunderstood, pressured, or doubted, he withdraws. Not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't feel safe to be vulnerable. That's why emotional understanding is power. When you know how to read a man's emotional world, you stop taking his distance personally. You stop thinking that every delay or silence means rejection. Instead, you start observing. You start trusting yourself more than your fears. You start realizing that chasing love only happens when you don't feel secure in your worth. And when you know who you are, you never have to chase again. Because the moment you understand men emotionally, you realize that love flows naturally when two people are emotionally aligned. You don't have to beg for communication, it just happens. You don't have to demand effort, it's already there. You don't have to perform or prove your value, it's already felt. You begin to attract men who are emotionally available because your energy no longer feeds on confusion. It thrives on peace. You see, emotional maturity changes the way you respond to love. You no longer want intensity without consistency. You no longer want chemistry without clarity. You no longer want someone who only loves you when it's easy. You want someone who chooses you even when life gets complicated, and that kind of love doesn't come from chasing, it comes from understanding. When you understand men emotionally, you learn that their silence sometimes means reflection, not rejection. Their distance can mean they're processing, not disappearing. Their hesitation can mean fear of failure, not lack of interest. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding wisely. You no longer get lost in what he says. You pay attention to what he shows. And once you master that awareness, love becomes peaceful. You start walking differently, talking differently, choosing differently. You no longer settle for potential. You align with effort. You no longer hope for love. You embody it. Because the greatest shift happens when you stop trying to make someone feel something for you and instead you start understanding what makes people feel safe enough to love freely. That's when you realize real love doesn't need to be chased. It meets you right where you are when you finally understand how to connect, not control. Understanding men emotionally reveals that love should flow naturally, not be chased. When you start to see love from this deeper place, you begin to realize that genuine connection cannot be forced, manipulated, or begged for. Love that needs chasing is often love that is not rooted in mutual understanding. When a relationship is built on emotional awareness, it moves with balance and flow rather than tension and pursuit. You start to see that the healthiest relationships form when both people meet each other halfway, not when one is constantly reaching while the other keeps pulling away. This realization changes how you respond to emotional distance, rejection, or uncertainty because you start to understand that not every silence requires you to fill it, not every delay requires you to act, and not every absence means loss. When love flows naturally, it's guided by emotional connection, not fear. Many people chase because they fear losing something before it's even theirs. They overthink, overgive, and overextend trying to prove they're worthy of being loved. But understanding men emotionally helps you step back from that pattern. You begin to see that men are drawn to peace, to balance, to the kind of energy that doesn't demand love but invites it. When you stop chasing, you allow a man to step into his role, to lead emotionally when he's ready, and to invest in you because he chooses to, not because he feels pressured to. That shift from chasing to allowing transforms the entire dynamic. It brings a calm confidence into your interactions because you know that what's meant for you won't require you to lose yourself. Emotionally, men want to feel needed but not smothered, desired but not demanded, valued but not idolized. When you chase love, you send the message that you are willing to abandon your peace just to hold on to someone else. But when you understand emotional balance, you communicate something different. You show that your love is grounded, not desperate. You attract through stillness and self-assurance, not pursuit. You begin to trust that your energy is enough, your presence is enough, and your emotional awareness is enough to draw in the right connection. Love that flows naturally feels mutual. It's reciprocal effort, shared vulnerability, and consistent intention. There's no chasing because both people move toward each other with purpose and understanding. When you stop chasing, your perception of love matures. You start to focus less on who stays or who leaves and more on whether the connection is emotionally healthy. You begin to prioritize peace over passion, alignment over attachment, and communication over confusion. You understand that a man who's emotionally in tune will never make you question your value. He will meet your energy with effort, and he will bring consistency that doesn't require constant reassurance. Love becomes something that feels steady and secure rather than something you have to fight to keep. When you reach that emotional clarity, you no longer chase because you've learned that what's truly meant for you will always feel mutual, calm, and aligned with your peace. Men express emotions through actions and consistency, not just words. This truth changes everything once you begin to understand it. So many people get caught up in what a man says rather than what he shows, hanging on to promises, explanations, and words that sound right but never translate into real effort. The emotional language of most men is not found in long conversations or poetic expressions. It's found in how they show up, how they protect, how they commit, and how they stay. Actions reveal what words try to hide, and consistency exposes the truth about emotional investment. When you truly grasp this, you stop overvaluing what's said and start paying attention to what's done. When a man is emotionally connected, his actions become intentional. He makes time, he remembers details, and he keeps his word because he understands that consistency builds trust. He won't need to convince you through speeches. You'll feel his presence through his reliability. Men are not always verbal creatures when it comes to emotions. Many were raised to associate vulnerability with weakness. So instead of saying, "I love you," repeatedly, they show it in the way they support, the way they protect, and the way they prioritize. It's subtle. But when you observe carefully, you'll recognize that the man who truly cares doesn't disappear when things get hard, doesn't make excuses for neglect, and doesn't confuse you with mixed signals. His consistency becomes his way of saying everything his words might struggle to express. Understanding this helps you detach from the illusion of emotional connection that's based only on words. Anyone can say the right thing in the moment, but not everyone has the emotional maturity to back it up with steady action. You start to notice that love is not proven in intensity, it's proven in reliability. A man who values you will show effort in his routines, not just his emotions. He'll create space for you in his life instead of asking you to constantly fit into his. His affection won't fluctuate based on mood or convenience. It will stay because his feelings are grounded, not impulsive. Emotional understanding helps you decode his behavior beyond surface-level gestures. You begin to see that when a man is emotionally invested, he naturally becomes consistent without needing to be reminded or pressured. The deeper truth is that consistency is emotional security in action. It tells you that his emotions are stable, that his interest is genuine, and that his priorities include you. When his words and actions match, trust grows. When they don't, confusion begins. That's why understanding this principle helps you guard your heart wisely. Instead of reacting to sweet words or emotional highs, you start to evaluate the pattern over time. You begin to notice effort, presence, and reliability as the real markers of love. Emotional understanding teaches you that the man who means what he says will prove it in the way he treats you every day, not just when it's convenient. You stop chasing validation because you know that a man's consistency is the clearest reflection of his emotional truth. Emotional safety is the foundation of genuine connection. Without it, love becomes a battlefield of misunderstandings, assumptions, and unspoken fears. Emotional safety is what allows two people to show up as their real selves without pretending, without performing, without constantly fearing judgment or rejection. For a man, emotional safety means he can express himself without being criticized for being too soft or too distant. For a woman, it means she can be vulnerable without feeling like her openness will be used against her. When emotional safety exists, both people feel seen, valued, and respected for who they truly are, not who they think they need to be to keep the other person interested. It's the invisible anchor that keeps a relationship stable when everything else feels uncertain. Men, in particular, respond deeply to emotional safety even though they rarely talk about it. Many grow up being taught to suppress emotion, to stay strong, to hide pain. So when they enter a relationship, they carry emotional armor that protects them but also isolates them. If they sense criticism, manipulation, or emotional volatility, they retreat because it feels unsafe to be vulnerable. But when they find emotional calmness and respect, they begin to open up in ways they didn't know they could. They start to express care through small but meaningful actions, checking in, listening more attentively, sharing personal fears, and investing more effort. Emotional safety gives them permission to stop performing strength and start sharing truth. For women, emotional safety comes from knowing that her emotions won't be dismissed or minimized. It means feeling secure that when she expresses her needs, they'll be heard rather than used against her. When emotional safety is mutual, it builds a rhythm of trust where both people feel free to communicate without fear of consequence. There's no need for games, no silent treatments, no emotional tests, because both understand that protecting each other's hearts is part of the connection. Emotional safety turns relationships into safe havens instead of war zones. It transforms defensiveness into honesty and competition into partnership. When you understand the emotional importance of safety, you stop romanticizing relationships that thrive on chaos and confusion. You stop mistaking intensity for love. You begin to seek calmness, not because it's boring, but because it's stable. You start recognizing that true emotional intimacy only grows in spaces where both people feel secure enough to be real. A man who feels emotionally safe will not run away, he will lean in. A woman who feels emotionally safe will not chase, she will trust. Safety becomes the soil where love grows, communication flows, and both people evolve together rather than apart. Without emotional safety, even the strongest attraction fades because love cannot survive in fear. But with emotional safety, everything deepens. Communication, affection, understanding, and respect. It creates the kind of bond that doesn't need constant reassurance because both already know they're safe in each other's presence. Free to love and be loved without fear of being misunderstood or rejected. When you know your worth, you stop seeking validation through pursuit. The need to chase often comes from the fear of not being enough, from the quiet insecurity that tells you love must be earned through effort, sacrifice, or convincing. But when you truly understand your worth, that mindset dissolves. You no longer chase because you realize that love built on proving your value will never bring peace. Knowing your worth gives you emotional strength. It teaches you that your presence is a privilege, not something to beg someone to notice. You start to understand that you don't have to compete for attention because the right person will recognize your energy without you having to over-explain or over-give. Validation becomes unnecessary when self-worth becomes your foundation. You stop asking, "Why doesn't he see my value?" and start realizing, it's not my job to make someone see what they're not ready to recognize. When you operate from a place of confidence, you stop lowering your standards to keep someone interested. You don't text first out of fear of being forgotten. You don't chase after emotional breadcrumbs, and you don't settle for half-effort connections. You begin to embody peace instead of desperation, and that energy shifts everything. People who are emotionally unavailable can no longer hold your attention because you've learned that being chosen is not an achievement, it's alignment. When you know your worth, rejection stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like redirection. You understand that if someone walks away, it's not a reflection of your inadequacy, but a sign that they couldn't meet you at your level of emotional depth. You no longer need validation from others because you've built it within yourself. You see love as something to be shared, not something to chase. Your time, your energy, your attention, they all become sacred. You give them where they're respected, not where they're taken for granted. Knowing your worth also teaches you emotional control. It helps you respond with calm rather than react with fear. You begin to trust that what's meant for you will not require you to lose yourself to keep it. Men respond differently to a woman who knows her worth. She doesn't need to convince, demand, or prove. Her energy speaks for itself. Her boundaries are clear, her expectations are steady, and her presence commands respect without saying a word. When a man senses that, it either inspires him to rise to the occasion or reveals that he never intended to match her energy in the first place. In both cases, she wins because she refuses to compromise her peace for temporary attention. Knowing your worth transforms the way you love. It makes you more selective, not in a prideful way, but in a peaceful way. You start valuing emotional reciprocity over intensity, effort over promises, and connection over chase. You no longer fear losing anyone because you understand that real love doesn't require you to abandon your self-respect. It only requires you to show up as your authentic self and let the right person meet you where you stand. Emotional awareness turns confusion into clarity and peace. When you begin to understand emotions, both yours and his, you stop reacting impulsively and start responding intelligently. You begin to see the difference between what's real and what's just fear. Emotional awareness gives you the ability to read between the lines, to understand silence without assuming rejection, and to recognize that not every emotional shift requires confrontation. It teaches you that peace doesn't come from controlling others, but from mastering yourself. The moment you stop letting emotions run wild and start observing them with understanding, you step into a space of calm power. You start realizing that emotional chaos often comes from misunderstanding, and clarity always comes from awareness. Men, by nature, often express emotion differently than women. While many women release emotions through words, men tend to process internally. Without emotional awareness, this difference leads to confusion and overthinking. You might think he's distant when he's actually processing, or believe he's detached when he's simply overwhelmed. But once you become emotionally aware, you stop personalizing his behavior. You understand that everyone has emotional rhythms, and not all love is shown in constant communication or dramatic gestures. This understanding helps you stay grounded and confident, even when things feel uncertain. You begin to communicate with empathy instead of assumption, and that changes the entire emotional dynamic. Emotional awareness also helps you identify your own triggers. It makes you conscious of the moments when insecurity whispers lies, when past pain tries to interfere with present peace, when fear convinces you to chase instead of trust. Instead of reacting from wounded emotion, you start to pause and reflect. You begin to ask, what is this feeling really trying to tell me? That self-awareness allows you to choose your response with strength and grace. It shifts your focus from needing emotional validation to maintaining emotional balance. You stop letting temporary feelings dictate permanent actions, and that's where peace begins to grow. In relationships, emotional awareness becomes a bridge to understanding rather than a wall of defense. It allows you to see where the other person is coming from without losing yourself in the process. You learn to listen differently, not to reply, but to understand. You learn that sometimes silence isn't distance, it's reflection. Sometimes disagreement isn't disconnection, it's an opportunity to grow in communication. Emotional awareness keeps you grounded in truth rather than pulled by insecurity. It gives you emotional maturity, and that maturity brings stability to everything around you. When you move with emotional awareness, confusion can no longer control you. You stop chasing answers that don't exist and start creating peace within yourself. You begin to attract connections that reflect your emotional stability because like energy always meets like energy. Love becomes calmer, communication becomes clearer, and life feels lighter. You understand that clarity doesn't